Hello everyone. Before we begin tonight's story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and if you would, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. It helps YouTube know to bring more stories like this one to people just like you. Story number 1. The Neighbor Who Never Left. When my grandmother died, I inherited her house in rural Pennsylvania. I was 26, broke, and grateful. The house was old but solid, built in 1908, 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a half-acre of yard ringed by black walnut trees. The nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile down the road. I moved in during the first week of September. By the second week, I'd met Mr. Hollis. He came up the driveway one evening as I was hauling boxes from my car. A tall, thin man in his 70s, wearing a brown cardigan and slacks that were a size too big. He introduced himself as the neighbor from the white farmhouse down the road and said he'd been friends with my grandmother for 40 years. He brought a tin of butter cookies. He stayed on the porch for an hour, telling me stories about her, how she used to bake bread every Sunday, how she'd nursed his wife through cancer in the 90s, how she'd cried at his wife's funeral harder than he had. I liked him immediately. He had the kind of careful, formal politeness that older men from that part of the country sometimes have. He never came inside. He always stood on the porch, hands folded, smiling gently. He visited maybe twice a week through September and October. We'd sit in the rocking chairs and he'd tell me about the history of the road, the families who'd lived there, the way the woods used to be full of deer before the highway went in. In early November, I drove into town for groceries and stopped at the post office. The postmaster, a woman named Diane, asked how I was settling in. I mentioned Mr. Hollis. I said it was nice having a neighbor who checked in on me. She went very still. "Honey," she said. "Carl Hollis died in 2019. Heart attack. His daughter sold the farmhouse 2 years ago. It's been empty ever since." I laughed. I told her she must be thinking of someone else. I described him, the cardigan, the height, the white hair, the way he held his hands. She wasn't thinking of someone else. I drove past the farmhouse on the way home. The windows were boarded up. The grass was waist-high. A faded realtor's sign leaned in the yard, the phone number sun-bleached to nothing. That night I sat on the porch with all the lights on and a kitchen knife in my lap and waited. He didn't come. He didn't come the next night either. I started to think maybe Diane had been wrong, or I'd been confused, or some drifter had been impersonating a dead man for reasons I couldn't fathom. On the third night, I heard the porch boards creak. I didn't go to the window. I sat in the kitchen with my back to the wall and listened. The rocking chair started to move. Slow, even, patient. Back and forth, the way he always rocked when he told his stories. It rocked for 40 minutes. Then it stopped. Then the floorboards creaked again, away from the chair, down the porch steps, and faded into the gravel of the driveway. I haven't gone outside after dark since. He still visits. I hear him every few nights. Sometimes he hums, an old hymn I don't recognize. Sometimes he just rocks. Last week I found a tin of butter cookies on the porch. The label was from a brand that stopped being sold in 1994. I haven't opened it. I don't know what would be inside if I did. Story number 2. I have chronic insomnia. Not the romantic kind where you stare meaningfully out a rainy window, the real kind, where you lie in bed for 6 hours staring at the ceiling and your thoughts start eating each other. After a year of it, my doctor referred me to a sleep clinic for an overnight study. The clinic was in a converted office building on the edge of town. The technician, a soft-spoken man named Brent, hooked me up to 23 electrodes, explained the camera in the corner of the room, and told me to try to sleep normally. He'd be monitoring from the next room. If I needed anything, I could just speak. There was a microphone in the ceiling. I slept. Badly, but I slept. Maybe 4 hours total. In the morning, Brent looked tired. He printed out the report and went over the basics: sleep stages, oxygen levels, the usual. Then he hesitated. "There's something on the video I'd like you to see," he said. "It's probably nothing. Probably a glitch. But I want to ask you about it." He turned the monitor toward me and played the footage. It was me, in night vision, lying on my back. Time-stamped 3:42 a.m. I was deeply asleep, breathing slowly. At 3:43 a.m., my head turned to the left, toward the camera. My eyes opened. I stared directly into the lens. Then I smiled. Very slowly. A wide, deliberate smile that pulled my cheeks up too high. I lifted my right hand and waved at the camera. 4 fingers wiggling. Then I lowered my hand, closed my eyes, turned my head back to center, and resumed sleeping. I have no memory of any of this. According to the EEG, I was in deep slow-wave sleep the entire time. My brain was not capable of waking, opening my eyes, smiling, and waving. It is medically impossible. Brent pointed at the screen. His voice was very careful. "That's not what I wanted to show you," he said. "Watch the corner of the room." He rewound the footage and pointed at the upper left corner, near the ceiling. At 3:42 a.m. Exactly 1 second before I turned my head, something moved in the dark there. A shape. Long and thin. It descended from the corner along the wall, slowly, like a spider lowering itself on a thread, and stopped just behind my bed. You couldn't see it well, just a deeper black against the dark, but it was there. It stayed there until 3 hours 43 minutes and 8 seconds, just after I waved. Then it withdrew back into the corner and was gone. Brent told me he'd been watching the monitor live. He hadn't seen anything in the room. He'd only noticed it on review. He gave me the recording on a USB drive. He said he didn't want to keep it on the clinic servers. He recommended I find a different doctor for follow-up. He was leaving the field, he said. He was going back to school for accounting. I've watched the footage maybe 100 times. I've shown it to friends. They always go quiet. One of them, a guy who works in film, said the smile doesn't look like my face. The proportions are wrong. The mouth opens too wide. I sleep with a camera in my room now. I review the footage every morning. So far, nothing. But I've started waking up with my jaw sore, like I've been smiling for hours. And last week my husband told me I waved at him in my sleep. 4 fingers. Wiggling. Story number 3. The Map app. My job involves a lot of driving. I'm a regional sales rep, 6 hours a day on rural highways. I use a navigation app constantly. The same one everyone uses. You know the one. About 6 months ago, the app started suggesting alternate routes. Not unusual. It does that to avoid traffic. But these routes were strange. Longer. Through back roads I'd never taken. The app would estimate them as faster even when they obviously weren't. The first time I followed one, it took me through 45 minutes of unmarked dirt roads through pine forest in the middle of nowhere. I came out 2 miles from where I'd started, having gained nothing. I assumed it was a glitch. It happened again the next week. And the week after. Always different routes, always pointless detours through empty country. I started ignoring the suggestions. Then one Tuesday in August, I was driving home from a client meeting near the Tennessee border. It was getting dark. The app pinged, faster route available. Save 12 minutes. I almost dismissed it. But I was tired and wanted to get home, so I tapped accept. The route took me off the highway onto a county road, then onto a smaller road, then onto a gravel road that wound through dense woods. There were no houses. No streetlights. No other cars. My headlights picked out the trunks of trees and nothing else. After about 20 minutes I realized I hadn't seen a road sign in a long time. The app showed me as a little blue arrow on a thin gray line, surrounded by green nothing. ETA, 8 minutes. I came around a bend and my headlights swept across a clearing. In the clearing was a house. A small white house, 2 stories, with a porch light on. There was a car in the driveway. A swing set in the yard. The app said, "You have arrived." I had not arrived. I lived 90 miles from there. I had never seen this house before in my life. I sat in my car with the engine running. The porch light cast a warm yellow square on the gravel. The curtains in the front window were open. I could see into the living room. There was a couch, a lamp, a television playing something with the sound off. And there was a man on the couch, watching the TV. He looked exactly like me. Same face. Same haircut. Same plaid shirt I was wearing at that exact moment. I watched him for maybe 10 seconds. Then he turned his head slowly and looked directly out the window at my car. He smiled. I threw the car into reverse and drove backward down that gravel road for half a mile before I dared to turn around. I didn't stop until I hit pavement. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the wheel. When I got home, my wife asked why I looked so pale. I didn't tell her. I went to bed. The next morning I opened the app and looked at my location history. The detour wasn't there. According to the app, I'd driven straight home on the highway. The trip log showed no deviation. I uninstalled the app. I use paper maps now. But sometimes, late at night, my phone buzzes with a notification from an app one don't have installed. Faster route available, it says. He's waiting. Story number 4. Grandma's dolls. My grandmother collected porcelain dolls. Her house had one room dedicated to them, a converted sewing room with floor-to-ceiling shelves on every wall, packed with hundreds of dolls of every era. Victorian dolls with painted faces. 1920s flapper dolls. Mid-century baby dolls with rolling eyes. Some were valuable antiques. Most were just things she'd picked up at flea markets over 50 years. I hated that room as a child. The dolls watched. There's no other word for it. You could feel them looking at you from every direction. My cousins and I dared each other to go inside and count to 10. None of us ever made it past 5. When my grandmother died last spring, my mother and her sisters had to clean out the house. They asked me to handle the doll room. None of them could stand to be in there. I drove down on a Saturday with a stack of empty boxes and a roll of bubble wrap. The house had been empty for 2 months. It smelled like dust and old fabric. I started at the top shelf and worked my way down, wrapping each doll, labeling the box, moving methodically. It was tedious but not bad. The dolls were just dolls. Whatever had spooked me as a kid was gone now, or had never been there. Around 4 p.m. I reached the bottom shelf of the last wall. There was a doll there I didn't recognize from childhood. It was tucked behind the others, half hidden. A boy doll, maybe 2 feet tall, dressed in an old-fashioned sailor suit. Porcelain face, painted blue eyes, dark brown hair. Nothing unusual about it except that it was looking at me. I mean, it was facing me. That's what I mean. The other dolls all faced forward on the shelf. This one was turned at an angle, body angled toward where I happened to be sitting on the floor. I figured my grandmother had positioned it that way for some reason. I picked it up, wrapped it, put it in a box, taped the box shut, and labeled it Sailor Boy, Miscellaneous Shelf. I finished around 6 p.m. and loaded the boxes into my car. I drove home, a 2-hour drive, and stacked the boxes in my garage to deal with later. My wife was visiting her mother that weekend. I had the house to myself. I made dinner, watched TV, went to bed around 11. At 2 a.m. I woke up because something was on my chest. I opened my eyes. The Sailor Boy doll was sitting on my chest, facing me. Its painted blue eyes were 6 inches from mine. I screamed. I threw it across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. I scrambled out of bed, turned on every light in the house, and stood in the hallway shaking for 10 minutes. When I finally went back into the bedroom, the doll was gone. I searched everywhere. I checked the garage, the box was still taped shut, exactly where I'd left it. I cut the tape open. The Sailor Boy doll was inside, wrapped in bubble wrap, exactly as I'd packed it. I drove the box back to my grandmother's house at 4 a.m. I left it on the porch with a note from my mother saying I couldn't finish the job. I never told her why. 3 weeks later my mother called. She'd had an estate sale. Most of the dolls had sold. She wanted to know if I wanted any keepsakes before she donated the rest. I said no. She paused. Then she said, "There's one I thought you might want. Your grandmother had a note pinned to it. It says it belonged to your grandfather when he was a little boy. A Sailor Boy doll. Do you remember it?" I told her to throw it away. Burn it if she could. She laughed and said she'd already mailed it to me. It should arrive tomorrow. It arrived this morning. The box is sitting on my kitchen table. I haven't opened it. I'm typing this from the kitchen. I can hear something moving inside. Story number 5. The Hiking Trail. I've been a serious hiker for 15 years. I've done sections of the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest, the Long Trail in Vermont. I know how to read a topo map. I know how to navigate by compass. I know what I'm doing in the woods. Last October I was doing a 4-day solo loop in the Adirondacks. Familiar territory, I'd done parts of the same trail system maybe a dozen times. The weather was crisp and clear. Foliage at peak. I was having a great trip. On the second night, I made camp by a small lake. Set up my tent, ate dinner, hung my food bag, watched the stars come out. Around 9 p.m. I crawled into my sleeping bag and read for a while before falling asleep. I woke up at some point in the night because I heard footsteps outside my tent. This isn't unusual in the backcountry. Could be a deer, a raccoon, a bear if you're unlucky. You stay still and quiet and wait for it to leave. I lay there listening. The footsteps walked slowly around my tent. Once. Twice. 3 times. They were bipedal. 2 feet, distinct, deliberate. Crunching on the dry leaves. I told myself it was another hiker. Maybe someone lost, looking for the trail. I called out, "Hello? Are you okay?" The footsteps stopped. A voice answered. A man's voice, friendly, casual. "Hey, sorry to bother you. I'm a little turned around. Mind if I come into your camp?" I almost said yes. He sounded normal. Reasonable. A little embarrassed, the way you'd sound if you were lost. But something stopped me. Some animal part of my brain. Because his voice was coming from the wrong place. It wasn't outside the tent. It was above it. Like someone was standing over my tent and speaking down through the rainfly. I didn't answer. I held my breath. After a long moment, the voice spoke again. Same friendly tone. Same casual cadence. "Hey, sorry to bother you. I'm a little turned around. Mind if I come into your camp?" Word for word. Exact same intonation. A recording. Or something imitating one. I stayed silent. My hand crept toward the bear spray in my tent pocket. The voice repeated the same sentence, in the same tone, 11 more times over the next hour. Sometimes from above the tent. sometimes from beside it. Once from what sounded like directly underneath. Each time identical. Each time in that same friendly, slightly embarrassed voice. Then it stopped. The footsteps walked away into the woods. I heard them crunching for a long time, getting fainter, until they were gone. I didn't sleep. At first light I packed my camp in 15 minutes and hiked out, 12 miles, no breaks. I made it to my car by 2 p.m. I drove home and didn't go back to the woods for 6 months. When I finally told another hiker about it, a guy I trust, who's been doing this even longer than I have, he didn't laugh. He just nodded slowly and said, "Yeah. There's a few of those out there. They learn from lost people. They use what they hear." I asked him what they were. He said, "Don't worry about what they are. Worry about not answering them."